Directors have the main role in producing pretty pictures when it comes to the silver screen. But film craft has a bunch of artists behind any creative work. That is essential to make the image shine. In this video, I will introduce to you the history of cinematography along with 5 of the most creative cinematographers of all time. In the beginning, there wasn't a specific rule called cinematography at that time. Directors were working as a cinematographer as well. For example, the Lumiere brothers, George Mills and Edwin Porter, were the most important cinematographers at that time. Sooner, things have changed. Cinema shots started to arise along with inventing artificial lighting, and officially cinematographer was born. A lot of names have shined like Karl Strauss, Charles Rocher and Ernest Palmer. However, the most talented cinematographer at that time was Billy Bitzer.
And one day they were having lunch, and someone didn't bring an old red tablecloth, they brought a white one. And as the sun moved through the lunch above them, it reflected light up into the faces. And Griffith called to Billy Bitzer, said, "Billy, come over here. Look at this, look at their eyes, look at their faces." And he said, "Why, yes, that's a reflected light." And that was the beginning of the use of reflectors.
Billy has done important cooperation with D.W. Griffith in films like Birth of Nation and Intolerance, as he was a part of discovering close-up shots, fades out and reflectors, introductory creative elements that are still with us until today. Fast forward, black and white cinema has become more of a recognition. Business was booming and movies were made at the highest pace. Studio has reproduced at the new space of creativity. It is officially Hollywood's golden era. Cinema's camera has become lighter, a satisfactory soft lighting, and superstars are sparkling. Cinematographers like Lee Grahams, Charles Lang, and James Hall have shaped 20s, 30s, and 40s black and white films, but none had as effective as Gary Toland.
He seemed to have an eye for things, and also was very creative. I mean, for instance, we much later started doing filming with a candlelight, for instance, or a match, and he already did it in Grapes of Wrath. He didn't have the technology we have today. Film was not as fast as it was, but already you get the idea that actually the light, when he's describing that empty house, comes from the hand and the match.
Toland's legacy has left new techniques in cinemas as an effective tool in Hollywood, where he stopped using fill lights in favor of deep black shadows. He used complex creative frames and dramatic scenes by combining bright lights to deliver an effective dramatic scope to the screen. He declared that the only way to learn new film approaches is by teaming with beginner filmmakers. However, his approach has been rejected at that time due to its complexity. But within a decade, his techniques had become the new standard. In 1941, he made Citizen Kane with Orson Welles. At that time, things have changed, and slowly, by 50s, movie scenes have converted to a true realistic color film by the very creative Robert Parks.
The winner for color cinematography in New York, To Catch a Thief, Robert Burks.
Parks was super talented among his peers as he used different effects along with using color as essential part of its composition in scenes design. The color transition was significant as Alfred Hitchcock's cinematographer. Parks will deliver the feeling of a beach breeze in To Catch a Thief.
It hasn't, it's just turned amphibious.
Oh,
I thought I'd come out and see what the big attraction was.
Good.
And possibly even rate an introduction. Mr. Burns has told me so little about you.
The next big thing came when Hollywood lost its golden age in the 60s and started competing with TV, which leads to introduce us to this, the CinemaScope. The next cinematographer who made the best use of cinema's new shape, the one and only Freddie Young.
Equipment was painted bright red, and he was called Chief. He was rather like head of a school in a way, you know. The operator was like a prefect.
He was imbued with the ambition of making English crews as good as, if not better than, the Americans.
I heard, and later I was to see, Freddie Young line his camera crew up every morning in front of the camera and inspect them from head to toe and correct their dress if it needed to be.
Young was the master of 70mm format, and no one has used it like him. He has teamed up with director David Lean on Lawrence of Arabia, Dr. Zhivago, and Ryan's Daughter. His image considered being some of the most memorable in all of film history.
Hailing the birth of a new star.
After the 60s, cinematography begins to transform into a more familiar look to today's picture style. The innovation of Steadicam allowed cinematographers to glide into new places it had never been before. But when it comes to the 70s and 80s images, there is nothing like Vittorio Sturaro.
Singularity, because light is visual energy. Visual energy arriving on you, like this light arriving on me. I don't see this light only with my eyes. I feel this light with all my body. The more the color moves from red to blue, you have the chance to see the variation of the metabolism and the blood pressure. So you have a different emotion.
Straro is an Italian cinematographer known for his single technique that shapes the tone of an entire scene. His best collaborations were those that Francis Ford Coppola and Bernardo Bertolucci, where he produced films such as Apocalypse Now, The Lost Empire, and The Conformist. This was the history of cinematography throughout 5 of the best cinematographers of all time in Hollywood. On the other side, documentary cinematography has seen a groundbreaking change. In 1930s was the year when we first heard about term documentary by filmmaker Robert Flaherty, when he produced Nanook of the North. Sooner, the Russian director Grigor Vertov has developed his philosophy of Kino Bravada, which he mounted his camera on a wall to reflect street life. He stated that documentary film should present life as much genuine as possible. During 1930s, documentary films became more known, and the German star Leni Riefenstahl has been one of the top industry documentary filmmakers. Her first film was The Moonlight, where she developed documentary style throughout using cinematic techniques. Things have seen big changes in 1950s as technology has allowed beginner filmmakers to express themselves more and more. Free Cinema Society was one of the biggest movements at that time, where small budget films weren't controlled by major studios. In the 60s, cameras became more portable and people started to shoot themselves while performing in their daily life. By time in the 70s, Fred Wiseman was one of the most talented documentary cinematographers, where he had produced almost 30 films where he focused on institutions' behavior.
Do you identify with this? Do you want your films to put the viewer into a place where they have to do some of the work to make that experience happen?
Yeah, well, the way I try to make the films, excuse me, is to give the viewer enough information so they can feel that they're present.
Fast forward, a recent creative documentary filmmaker was Nick Bromfield, where he used the performative mode the most, and has performed as well in his films. Bromfield is an investigative journalist where he used to ask rough questions to his interviewee.
And do you think the same person was responsible for the 2 killings?
Yes.
I am Shadi Homer, and I am a documentary cinematographer where I will shoot my next film using the poetic mode and deliver the story throughout close-up and medium shots. My next film, called A Mile in My Shoes, inspired by Pocket's film.